Hi, everyone. Welcome to Behaving Creatively, a new podcast miniseries from Audience Alchemy. I'm your host, Josh Aviner, and on this miniseries, we're diving into the intersection between behavioral science and the performing arts. On today's episode, we're in conversation with Mike Rafael from Nexus Ticketing Solutions. Mike is a ticket pricing expert and consultant who started off-Broadway and now works on Broadway with big clients like Wicked. We talk about how to set the right ticket price for the right seat at the right time for your show, regardless of what kind of show you have. This is a really interesting interview where we talk about the psychology behind why consumers buy tickets at certain prices, what makes it more appealing or what makes it less appealing. There are loads of really interesting tools and tactics that Mike shares that anybody who's setting prices for their show can learn and use. Without further ado, let's dive in. Mike, thank you so much for chatting with me. I'm very excited to speak with you. I've been getting more and more interested in pricing strategy, particularly as it relates to ticket sales, and you seem to be the expert on this topic. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how you honed in this niche and got into the ticketing game.
Uh, Thank you. It's great to be here. First of all, I love talking about this, so thank you for indulging me. There are two phrases I use. One is "in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king," and "follow the money." Right. So I've been in theater for about 30 years, and I've worked in everything from touring shows to general management to producing. But I got interested in where the money comes from, and that leads you to sales. I started off Broadway. Playwrights Horizons, which is a great off-Broadway theater, had a little ticketing service called Ticket Central, and they hired me and said, we're either going to shut it down or we're going to make it the off-Broadway ticketing service. And I was there for 3 years, and our gross sales went from $850,000 to $13 million in 3 years, which instantly made me a ticketing guru for all the wrong reasons. I mean, sometimes it's nice to be in the right place at the right time. Off-Broadway became really hot. And it's where a lot of celebrities were going. A lot of the nonprofits were doing really interesting new work, which is, I think, something we'll get into a little bit later. As a result of that, everybody was like, how did you do that? What do we know? To be fair, there's a guy named Nick Falzone who does what I do at Disney for Lion King. And about 10 years ago in the New York Times, there was an article about how Lion King, which at that time was 10 years old, was the top grossing show on Broadway. And it was all about dynamic pricing. And Nick is the director of ticketing for Disney, and he had started doing this really interesting pricing towards demand, pricing towards when the audience is there, when the audience is buying, right? Rather than the blunt force instrument that Broadway used for years, which was set a price and then discount seasonally. It's like, oh, well, there are less people coming in the winter, we'll just put out discounts in the market. Dynamic pricing is, no, let's change all of our prices for every seat and find the true value of the seat based on when people are buying, when people are coming, who they are, tourists over the summer, locals in the winter and fall. Nick, of course, made the world safe for me. So everybody said, I want one of those. Now, there are maybe 6 to 10 people now who do what I do. And I got hired on Wicked because I had worked on Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, and we, for whatever you might have heard about that show, we had very good grosses very early on. So Wicked hired me and said, do what Lion King's doing. It's been a really interesting ride because in the 10 years since that article in the Times, so much has changed. I mean, besides the pandemic in the middle of that, right? So much has changed in terms of ticketing and pricing, and costs have gone up, which means ticket prices have to go up to keep pace with that so that Broadway is viable as an economic model. So that's kind of how I got into it. There's also an informal confederacy now of people who do what I do, and we talk and we compare notes. We're not allowed to talk about prices, but we can talk about strategies and what we're seeing, and that's really helpful.
Do you have a background in, oh, I'm sorry to cut you off, Mike, but do you have a background in data science? How did you, like, I feel like this must be so much math to figure out, the perfect algorithm for shifting tickets in one direction or another.
I was in college for 2 years, 4 semesters, and my major went from sociology to political science to religion to theater. And I would argue that there's actually a progression there. And then I dropped out and became an anti-nuclear activist. So I have absolutely no background in anything I currently do, but I've always been fascinated in analytics. The most important question is why. not what, but why. Why do people do what they do? Why are you doing it this way? There's a tendency in theater to say, do it this way. Why? Because that's the way we've always done it, which is a terrible answer. So if you start from the premise of there's got to be a better way to do it, let's find out what that is. That leads you down some interesting paths.
And do you feel like your assumptions on dynamic pricing 10 years ago are quite different from, what you've learned since? Or do you feel like, there's some rules of thumb that tend to always work?
It's funny. One of the first things I started saying back then was, the right price for the right seat at the right time. And that's still true. How we get to that has changed because data science has come into it, data analytics. And now we're beginning to look at AI for this. And that helps us tremendously, but it's still new ways of answering the original question, which is what's the right price for the right seat at the right time to make somebody, to convert that sale.
How do you begin that conversation? Say you're a producer and you have your new show, it's going off Broadway or Broadway. Where do you, if you don't have historical data like Lion King or Wicked, do you pull the number out of thin air? Do you look what was in the theater before you, or a show that's like yours? How do you start when you're at the beginning?
Okay, so this is terrible. Broadway, this still boggles my mind saying this out loud. Broadway publishes their gross sales every week and has for 25 years. You can go online and find what every Broadway show made last week, how many tickets they sold, what percentage of the audience was full, and what price they charged. And you have 25 years of historical data for that. So once you start with that base and start analyzing that, you're halfway home. Then you start factoring in your own data or data that you can parse from. Most producers have done other shows, so they have some data. And then you have to subdivide it and say, well, this is a musical, this is a big brand IP musical, this is a play transferring from off Broadway, this is a star-driven revival. And you compare to it's like-minded modeling, right? So if you start with that huge reservoir of data that's published literally every week, it's a great, anybody can get into this. And I'm absolute proof of that.
But do you, for example, say, like you said, you have your two-person star off-Broadway play that's coming in now. Like, surely you have, I feel like there was one with Daniel Craig, like a couple years ago that was sold out the whole run. And then I'm sure you have stuff that like tanked after a week or two. Nothing comes to mind immediately. But are you picking for the average? Are you picking for the best case scenario? Or is it just like you're trying your best and then you'll adjust once you're open and find that optimal spot?
That's a fascinating question, particularly this week, because literally Wicked has been the top grossing show on Broadway for 3 months. We're doing $2.4 million every week. Last week, we were the second highest grossing show on Broadway. The highest grossing show on Broadway was Othello, 700-year-old play, starring Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal. And they just this week set the all-time box office record for a play on Broadway. And that's in previews, which means they've gotten really good at their pricing because they went into it saying, we have stars, we see what people are paying in advance, we think this is where the demand is, and we're going to price accordingly. We're not going to wait for the audience to tell us. We're going to go into this guessing correctly. And they've come out of the box incredibly hot. And you're going to see the same thing with the George Clooney play, which starts previews this week. They're big stars on Broadway. Broadway is cool right now in a way that it hasn't been for a while. And as much as Wicked and the Wicked movie helped make musicals cool again and make Broadway cool again, the influx of stars to Broadway is piling on top of that to make it Broadway's a destination again, which is really exciting.
What's interesting about those very high ticket, plays and musicals to me is there's a concept in behavioral science called anchoring. So if you show a $500 ticket right when you get there, the $125 ticket doesn't seem so bad because you're comparing it, to the $500 ticket. Do you guys use any of those sort of psychological tricks when you're doing it, or is it really just this is the absolute maximum top ticket price we think somebody will pay?
Well, that's the interesting question, and we limit ourselves on Wicked because we want to make it accessible. We're also in the largest theater on Broadway. We're in the 1,900-seat theater. On limited run plays, it's a smash and grab, get in and get out. you want to maximize your price right from the get-go. So you're looking at how high is up right away. The other thing that's fascinating, that's an interesting version of exactly what you just said. Brokers in the secondary market. Brokers will tell you very quickly if you're a hot show or not, because they are literally responding. They don't care about the show. They don't care if it's a musical. They don't care if it's any good. They care if there's an audience for it, and then they start pitching to that audience. Brokers will buy 20 seats to a show. They'll buy 20 tickets to Othello, and they'll do exactly what you just said. They will take 2 of those tickets and put them on sale for $2,000 on StubHub. Then they'll take the other 18 and put them on sale for $500. And you're going on StubHub going, $2,000. Oh, wait, here's some $500 tickets. That's great. And you're like, and then the thing is, the day before the show, they'll drop those $2,000 tickets down to $500. So they've created their own market, right? And it works. That's part of it. The other thing you have to understand about Broadway is the demographics of the audience. When are people buying? When are they most likely to buy? New York is about to have a record year for tourism, both domestic and international, which means we have more tourists coming to the city than ever before. Tourists tend to buy further in advance. The best time to get to them is right after they book their tickets, their plane tickets in their hotel, and say, hey, you're going to be in town. What do you want to see? You have to see a musical while you're in New York. So you're selling some tickets 30 days out. On a hit show, you may be selling even further out. And then you're selling a lot of tickets week before. So that's in-market tickets. And that's also locals who are like, you know this, you don't make plans to the last minute. You're like, let's do something on Thursday. Okay, what do you want to do? Let's go see a show, what's available. So you're pricing to very different sales patterns in different places. The other thing that's changed tremendously in the 10 years that I've been doing this is, in the old days, you would say, okay, we're going to do some pricing for tourists, some pricing for locals, some pricing for suburban. But with the internet now, it's all the same. You do a search and it's not saying, oh, you live in Poughkeepsie. No, it's saying, here are all the prices from everywhere. And so your pricing has become less calibrated to where people are coming from and more open market.
So we've talked about sort of the high end of the pricing. Say we're going to the low end. Now, going back to sort of the psychological concepts, potentially if you're showing the show's 50% off, you're signaling the show's not of high quality. So when it comes to pricing the low end of the ticket, how do you think about balancing well, let's set it high so that when we discount, we can still get a good portion, versus just setting the ticket low and trying not to discount it and minimize those things?
It was funny. I was talking with some folks who do what I do the other day. And one of the things we all agreed on is discounting is going away. It used to be you set your prices and then you discounted specific to time before the show, time of year. Now it's set your prices for the season and don't discount because of exactly what you're saying. And the minute you discount, you're telling people it's a off-brand product. So saying, oh, our tickets are $100, but you can get them for $50, price your tickets at $50. And price them to move early, because the fewer tickets you have left at the end, the more you're going to get. So you want to get your less valuable seats out of the house first, so that your more valuable seats you can then price up and say, somebody goes to the seating map and it's like, oh, there are only 100 seats left. I better buy them now. That becomes a forcing function, and it forces the price up. So you want to sell lower earlier and higher later is ideally it. That's the goal. And it's always fascinating to me when you look at the seating chart for a Broadway house. A Broadway theater is between 500 and 1,900 seats. You have to have at least 500 seats, and the largest house in Broadway has 1,900. If you're looking at row L and row M in the orchestra, row L is priced at $200 and row M is priced at $150. What is the difference of one row? It's arbitrary, and you're pricing in batches, but as the ticketing person, you are literally making that determination that I can get 200 back to that. No, after that, I need to lower the price. There's value in moving the 150 seats first because it makes the $200 tickets more valuable, if that makes sense.
Do you have any ideas as to why, say somebody, I have some ideas, but I'm curious what you think. Say you're that ticket buyer and you have the 150 seat in row L and the seat in front of you is 250. Are they buying the 250 seat because of their own internal I have a max number and I'm going to spend up to my next number? Do they really think it's a better view? Is it a status related thing if I want to get the best seat in the house? How do you think people make those decisions, or what are they considering?
There were a number of things. Age, older people want to sit closer for obvious reasons. The intimacy of it. Yes, I used to remember going to an off-Broadway theater that was a nonprofit. And the person who did the ticketing for them said, people don't care about where they sit, they care about where their friends are sitting. If they look across the orchestra and their friends are sitting closer, they're going to have a bad time at the show. So part of it is, yes, you want to, there's a status attached to it. That's part of it. There is, perception plays a large part in the valuation of a ticket. And feeding that perception, when I was off Broadway, our theaters were 299 seats, so really small and intimate. And one of our taglines that we used was, every seat in our house is a house seat on Broadway, parentheses, that you can't get, right? Say you saw it first. You want to be the one at the cocktail party saying, oh my God, I saw this amazing show off Broadway. It's going to move to Broadway. You should see it when it moves, which of course is a dig, right? It's like, I'm cool and I found it first, but when it moves, you can see it.
I say that about Hamilton. My wife was clever enough to get tickets while it was at the Public. I'm like, oh, I saw it at the Public when it was longer. You didn't even see the missing bits.
It's funny. So, we're talking about Othello and Good Night and God Bless, which are going to be huge hits on Broadway. George Clooney, Denzel Washington, Jake Gyllenhaal, sure. If you told me that the two hottest tickets on Broadway last year were going to be Oh Mary and Stereophonic, which came from a commercial off-Broadway production, the other which came from a nonprofit off-Broadway production, and they had the highest average ticket prices of the year on Broadway. That's insane. And that's because word of mouth, which started off Broadway, and people who discovered it, by the time it got to Broadway, were like, you have to see this.
Yeah.
And that drove the price up.
We call that in behavioral science social proof. So you have two restaurants, right, serve the exact same thing. One has a big long line outside the outside of it. One has nobody in it. If you don't know anything, you're going to go to the one that has the long,
right,
line outside, because you're assuming other people know something you don't.
Right. The other thing that's interesting about that, particularly in terms of behavioral science, is the town square has changed. Remember what I said originally, which is people want to go to a cocktail party and say, oh, I just saw this amazing show off Broadway. The cocktail party doesn't exist anymore. It's now an online chat room. It's now influencers. It's now what to do in New York, this weekend. That chatter has moved online, and you have to find that and find those people and get them in to start that chatter. It's no longer your dentist telling you have to see cats.
I think I'm the one bringing my dentist to see shows at this point. Going back to setting prices, how do you determine how many groups or batches is an optimal number? So we should have 2 tiers, 5 tiers, 100 tiers. Every single ticket should be a different price. Is there a methodology to making that determination?
Yes, a lot of it early on is trial and error. You have more prices early because you want to see what's selling, and the audience will tell you. And then you move towards them, right? You always move towards your audience. The goal is eventually to have fewer and fewer prices. You say, let's see, and you'll have more prices early because you want to sell as many seats as you can early, because it creates more demand, and then you can raise your prices later. So finding that sweet spot is trial and error. And the way to do that is get on sale early, have, change quickly. If you see that your $50 seats are going, you're like, they're $75 now. And someone who got them last week feels they got a great deal. And frankly, that works psychologically too, because they're going online going, I got this amazing deal. You better buy now. It becomes a forcing function of its own. So a lot of it is trial and error and response in real time, which we've gotten better at. Back in the day, there was a tendency towards set it and forget it pricing. Now we are changing prices daily. And as you get closer to the performance, sometimes several times a day.
Have you done willingness to pay surveys where you're sort of, rather than reacting to people as they purchase, try in advance to get a sense of what their min, their max, what a good deal would be, what would be too much? Or are those ineffective because of the unique nature of if a show is a hit or not?
Well, it's two things. One, how do I say this nicely? People lie.
Yes, people don't say what they do.
Right.
Yeah.
Every survey I've ever seen of Broadway, in terms of ticket pricing, says the prices are too high, and I'm like, yes, they're too high, and I'm completely sold out. So yes, and I have many times seen people give me ticketing advice online, and it's completely wrong, which is fine. You have to sometimes adjust to the expectation. I don't find surveys as helpful as I think some other people do. I tend to respond to true market value. I think people let their wallets do their talking, and that's what you have to listen to. If that makes
Oh, absolutely.
affect their behavior with pricing. That's the inverse, which is, like I said before, if you price something at $50 and $75 the next week, you're beginning to affect behavior by training people to buy earlier because prices are going to go up. Or if they see prices going down, then you get into they're discounting, they must not be a hot show. It's the empty restaurant syndrome. So sometimes you also, this is terrible, but it's true that we do this. We will hold back seats to make it seem like a performance is better sold. We have house seat holds, which are held for the producers or for people who work on the production. You will sometimes hold additional seats back and release them later because you know you can get more for those later, and you'd rather move your cheap seats first. You also don't want people looking at a
Empty seating map.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's definitely, it goes back to social proof. Why is every seat, available to me right now? For, like, say you have a VIP ticket or a premium ticket or a general admission ticket, do you think about doing any kind of bundles in general, or is that a thing that has not come into Broadway yet? So get your VIP seat with the backstage tour with the T-shirt and the mug.
That is coming to Broadway. You're seeing it more and more. You're seeing VIP lounges in theaters. You're seeing early access to the theater. You're seeing a merchandise item added, or a special drink. You also, frankly, have to take that into account in pricing because, frankly, two people in their 60s who are seeing a play want to sit in the front of the house and they'll pay $200, $250, $300. A family of four with a couple of young kids who want to see a musical need a more affordable seat, and they will sit in the middle of the house or the back of the house because they're taking their kid to their first Broadway show, and that's what they can afford for a family of four. And the nice thing about Broadway is the worst seat on Broadway is a great seat in every sports stadium and concert arena in the United States. The 1900 seat at Wicked is a great seat. You can see the show. You're not going to miss anything. We don't have a video replay yet, but you're pretty much locked into what's happening on that stage. So part of bundling is, and we offer group price sales. We've always had group prices. So, get a group together and come and save on the price. But yeah, taking into account the customer experience, whether it's they have to come in from out of town and they're staying in hotels, or they're driving in from the suburbs, they're going to dinner first. You have to factor your price into what they're paying for the evening, not just for the show. And if you can help them with that, with bundling, say, hey, buy this ticket and get a discount on parking across the street or get a discount at the restaurant nearby. That helps as well, too. You have to take into account the full customer experience.
On that topic, there's a term called partitioned pricing versus all-inclusive pricing. So that's, do you see the base price and then they surprise you with fees as you keep going, or is it just it's $100 and that's all inclusive of the fees and everything else? New York State has moved, I think, towards you have to do all-inclusive pricing. Have you seen any differences in people's willingness to pay? Have you had to lower prices at any point because of the all-inclusive? Is it better because it allows people to plan and not have additional surprises? What are your thoughts on that?
A much better customer experience. Customers are much happier knowing what they're paying, and they can make smarter decisions knowing going in, not waiting to check out to find out that it's $20, $30, $50 more. It's also funny because we're all geniuses and we were like $99.50. We're getting price tickets at $99.50. Then you add the service fee and it's $115.75, and you're like, damn it. I was under 100, now I'm not. So you do have to factor that in. You have to price towards what the customer's paying, not what you're getting for the ticket. That also affects how you use different sales channels based on what their fees are, because one price doesn't fit all. What our primary ticketing service for Wicked is Broadway Direct, the Nederlander theaters, they own their own. But we also sell through Ticketmaster and Today Tix and Broadway.com and other sites. You have to take into account what those fees are, so what their all-in pricing is, because they're different depending on the sales channel that you go to. And frankly, you also have to take into consideration the secondary market. One of the things that's really tricky about Broadway is that all of our primary ticketing services are closed ecosystems. They sell Broadway to Broadway. They're either owned by the theater owners or they're Broadway specific. Broadway.com, Today Tix, all they sell are Broadway tickets or off Broadway. Telecharge, Broadway Direct. The larger market, the entertainment market, what we've had post-pandemic is an influx of a new audience that I call the culturally curious. It used to be that you were a ballet person, or you were a museum person, or you were a musicals person, and that's what you did. You had your subscription to Lincoln Center, and that was what you did. Nowadays, people are like, on Tuesday night, they're going to a rock club in Brooklyn. On Thursday night, they're going to the hot new restaurant. And on Saturday night, they're going to a Broadway show. Getting in front of the culturally curious and pricing beyond Broadway to a new customer is really critical. And the thing is, if people are looking for a hot ticket, we refer to StubHub and SeatGeek and Vivid Seats as the secondary market. It's a misnomer. For a lot of people, they are now the primary. That's where their favorite concert artist is coming to MetLife Stadium. They're not even going through the artist website. They're going right to StubHub and buying their tickets there. And they're being resold by brokers. Sometimes they are primary and the secondary. We have to take that into account now. We can bemoan it and say, oh my God, people are buying my tickets and reselling them in the secondary market. It's like, yes, but think of it from the customer experience. If that's where they're going, you got to go fishing where the fish are. And you have to take that into account sometimes. Long term, particularly with the influx of AI, as it affects search, how we develop a relationship with the secondary market is going to be critical for the health of Broadway, because the hottest shows sell out. And the minute you sell out, your tickets are available in the secondary market because people can get more than you're charging for them. And that's a challenge. I mean, because it's all about the customer experience for us. It's not about how much can we get for the ticket. It's how much can we get and still have the customer walk out of the show saying, oh my God, that was amazing and worth every penny. There are ticket prices for those hit shows that we were talking about before that are well north of $1,000. I have worked in theater a long time. I have never seen a performance worth $1,000. Never. And that's no knock on it. It's just that's an awful lot of money for someone to invest in a 2-hour experience.
And I think I saw though the Taylor Swift tickets averaged around $1,000. So I guess it depends on how extreme of a fan you are to some degree. And I'm not sure Broadway has anything yet, Taylor Swift level fandom. But
and we also do 8 shows a week, 52 weeks a year. We're not sold out. We're sold out.
There's much more opportunity.
Right. Taylor Swift is in town for a week at most, and won't be back for several years. So that's it's an interesting dynamic, right?
So, you mentioned a little bit about the curious consumer. What other trends do you feel like have happened post pandemic? One thing you and I talked about offline was the collapse of the advanced sales market, but that perhaps it's starting to grow back again.
Yes.
Anything
Yes.
you notice that in this recovery that seems unusual or predictably notable?
Well, it was really fascinating. So when Broadway came back, Hamilton, Lion King, and Wicked got together and decided to bring Broadway back in September, but I think it was 21, 22, I forget exactly. We knew coming back that there were certain audiences that just weren't going to be back initially. First of all, there was very limited travel. So international tourism was not going to come back initially. Older people were less inclined to go to the theater, younger kids who were much more susceptible. So we talked about replacement audiences. How do we over-index against the audiences that will be coming back to, in the short term, replace the audiences that won't be back for a while. We did such a good job of developing new audiences and people who were so desperate to go out and just get out of the friggin' house and discovered theater. And we developed these new audiences that when the traditional audiences began to come back, we built back better, which is great and very encouraging for Broadway. But you then have to factor in the changes in behavior. For a long time, you're right, there were no advanced sales. So all of your sales were week before. Which is a really white knuckle, your pricing wise, because you're like, hold, go. That's changed. The average advanced purchase window has gotten longer. There are a lot of big hits on Broadway now, so you have to buy a little further in advance. That behavior has changed. The thing that I find really fascinating that's happened even more recently is the consideration phase. How did they hear about you? How are they doing their research? What's their consideration in going? That's fundamentally changed for Broadway. The way shows used to market to those folks was they went to culture seekers and were in the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, or now you're going online and trying to find people, and it's not necessarily people who are going online searching for Broadway shows. They're searching for something to do or something cool or something their friends recommended. That's a different marketing equation than the traditional, I've got a musical, I'm going to sell it to people who like musicals. Very different. You also have a theory on Broadway that says every 5 years, there's a mega hit on Broadway that makes Broadway cool again. You can go back and say, Hamilton was Book of Mormon, was Rent, was The Producers. And there was a theory that said post-pandemic, we haven't had that mega hit yet. And the odd thing is Wicked has become that mega hit. Wicked, a 21-year-old musical has become the hottest ticket on Broadway, and it has a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's made musicals cool, it's made Broadway cool, and then the influx of stars coming to Broadway, you're like, oh, I can sit 100 feet from George Clooney, cool, right? And off Broadway, so you're getting this wonderful influx of the tried and true and proven star value, new shows like Omarion Stereophonic, which arrive with this pedigree of it's cool, you have to see it. That's a great time to be working, great time to be doing what I do, great time to be working on Broadway, because you have audiences arriving from different places. You have the traditional audience, you have the tourist audience, but you also have the culturally curious audience, the new audience, and first timers. And I love asking people what the first show they ever saw on Broadway is, because everybody has a story. No matter how bad the show was, they have a story. If you get them that first time, you'll get them again. Then it's just remarketing, and remarketing is easier than marketing.
So you feel optimistic about the short-term future of where Broadway is headed?
Yes, I've been thinking a lot about AI recently, as it's going to impact specifically what I do, but the industry larger. And it's really fascinating. There was an article in the New York Times last week that said AI isn't going to replace humans, but humans who use AI are going to replace humans who don't use AI. And I think that's true. And how we, in the discovery process, how people discover Broadway and how people purchase their tickets for Broadway is going to change dramatically. What won't change is the fact that we perform live 8 shows a week, 52 weeks a year, and we do it in 100-year-old theaters. I mean, nothing's changed. The movies, black and white movies were going to kill theater. Color movies were going to kill black and white movies. TV was going to kill We're still here, to coin a phrase, and we will be here. How people arrive at the theater will be different. How they discover us and get there. But what we do on stage will remain the same. There will always be a need for people to gather in a small, dark room and share common emotions.
Now, on AI and in pricing in particular, I mean, I think one can imagine how you could use AI in marketing. It knows more about you than Facebook already knows about you. It's making an even more detailed persona. It knows you love popcorn, so it's showing you a picture of popcorn with the ad or whatever the detail is. Do you see that flipping over to pricing, where the price would be all the way down to the individual? Like, oh, Josh's willingness to pay using my, AI predictability is this amount, where you're no
Yes.
longer charging per seat, you're charging per who you think the person is? And then attached to that, is that ethical, or are there issues with charging individuals differently based on who they are rather than on demand or time or other more event based
I've
metrics?
actually had the inverse experience, which is rather than being able to micro target pricing to a specific customer based on their sales patterns, you have the inverse, which is AI finds everything. You do a search for tickets for a show, and AI will come back and go, here's what it is charging on the show website. Here's what it's charging on Broadway.com. Here's what it's charging on Vivid. By the way, there's a guy selling a ticket on eBay. And you're like, oh, damn. I mean, you now have to take all of that into consideration because channels that you don't control the pricing in are impacting the consumer's decision. And search. And they all show up in search. I mean, AI is an all-in experience. So I can't micro-target in the way I used to. It gives me better tools to do micro-targeting, but it makes micro-targeting less likely to help, ironically.
But in how you frame that, do you imagine that then driving down prices, or that, like, what do you think the consequences of being able to see the full field of what people are charging?
I think you will get closer to true pricing because the reality is, think about what we said before. You put your 2 seats on for $1,000 and then you charge the rest at $500. And everybody wants to buy the 500 tickets because someone's selling $2,000 tickets. If AI does a search and they return results, and some of those results are showing you overpriced tickets in the secondary market, it's more likely to drive you to the primary where you're priced by the show at hopefully a more reasonable price. So seeing the full width of pricing will drive you towards a truer price. It will drive you towards the price that the person doing the ticketing, hopefully me, can sell the most tickets at. Because for us, it's about, can we sell one ticket for $10,000? I used to call it the golden ticket, right? We were going to get to a point where dynamic pricing will allow us to sell one seat for $1 million and declare victory and go home, and we do the performance for one person. That's not the goal. The goal is to fill every seat in the house at the best price for that person, the price that person is willing to pay and still have a good experience. AI will help us do that, I think.
On what you just said about filling every seat in the house, I imagine there must, though, be some kind of tension between volume and price. Like,
Yes.
what if we sold 90% of the house and it was a little bit more expensive, so the total profit will be higher, versus selling 100% of the house and the ticket price being lower, but having the experience of seeing the show in a full house. And I imagine some people are oriented around just let's do profit maximization. Other people are oriented around the, like, let's give the best experience to the consumer, which includes, the feeling of sitting in a sold out theater, and for the company as well, seeing a sold out house. Because you take the extreme model, like, is it better to have a performance for one person in a 1,900 seat house where that person is paying $1 million, or is it better to have a full house and make less profit? So have you had to navigate that conversation? Do you see different producers taking different tacts? What is that like?
Absolutely. And I'd say two things. This is going to be a little esoteric, so bear with me. Measles. So the measles vaccination rate in this country is going down. The threshold that the US government wants is 95%, because at 95%, pretty much everyone's protected. And frankly, there are people who can't get the measles vaccination, but at a 95% threshold, they're protected too, because the people they're interacting with are, have the vaccination. The scary number is 92%. Once you get down to 92%, you're seeing more and more outbreaks of measles. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Now, that's a very narrow window between 95 and 92. The same thing is true in ticketing, right? Do I want a sold out house? Yes. I am happy to 95% sold out house, because it's doing exactly what you're talking about, which is, if I have a 95% sold house with an average ticket price of $150, as opposed to a 100% sold out house with an average ticket price of $120, I'm better off at 95%. Once you start slipping down that slope, once you get below 92, 90, then it's not about what am I pricing the tickets at, it's about what people are willing to pay, and that goes down exponentially, right? You see a drop off at certain attendance levels. And that's what you're really keeping an eye on. You know, the theory also goes, once you get to 95%, it's easy to get to 100. Getting from 90 to 95 is the bigger battle, right? And you also have to be careful because, you know, you don't want to price it so aggressively that you have empty seats, because the other, you know, going back to people looking across the orchestra and seeing their friends sitting in better seats, looking across the orchestra and seeing empty seats is a much worse experience. You're like, oh, you know, if it's a few people, like, oh, I guess their flight from Chicago got canceled. If it's a lot, people are saying, maybe I shouldn't have come to this show. So you need a certain capacity to create the demand, but the pricing has to respond to the true demand to get to that. It's a fun science in its own way.
Wow. Okay. I'll try to wrap it up. Maybe two more questions. One, I'll jump to off-Broadway, and then I'll do a broader one. Does off-Broadway use these same techniques the way Broadway does? Are they missing it? I know we hear a lot of stories about regional venues and off-Broadway venues shuttering or losing their space or combining or dropping down to fewer performances. Is that because they're not taking advantage of these things? Is it because maybe they have a nonprofit mission where they want to have all tickets at $20 and therefore they have competing interests? Or is it just something totally different going on?
Here's the interesting thing about that to me, and I don't have the full view, but I've talked with a number of people, particularly in regionals and nonprofits. The subscription model is gone. Subscribers are gone. People who used to say, I'm going to buy a 6-show season at this theater because I love that theater and I know they're going to do good work. They're like, no, I'm going to pay as I go. I'm going to, and it goes back to the people aren't ballet, museum, opera anymore. They are, I'll have one of each. And they want to keep their options, you know, buy later, go to what they want to do the next week, not buy ahead and say, oh, well, I know I'll write it into my calendar. I've got shows booked for March, April, June. The subscription model is broken. Until we fix that, it's really hard because most nonprofit theaters and regional theaters start with their subscription. They're like, we're going to sell 1/3 of our house on subscription, and then we have to fill in the rest of the seats. If you have to sell every show in your season as an individual show, it changes your programming because you want every show to have an audience. You can't say we're going to take a risk on our fifth show of the season. It might not be everybody's cup of tea, but we have a subscription base that allows us to take that risk. So that becomes really tricky. People are willing to go a little further afield to find the new, but they're not going to buy it in advance. There's the recommendation model. They're waiting for someone to tell them what's cool. Influencers have become, we've always had influencers. Now we've given them a name and a salary.
I have a theory too that I'm hoping to prove out in the next year or two, but that while subscriptions increase revenue, I have a feeling they decrease drop count, like actual attendance compared to single tickets, because the association of the purchase is so far in the past that, yes, missing a show if you bought a ticket today and the show is tomorrow, missing that feels pretty bad. Like you should try to spend that money, while if you bought it in the fall and now it's the spring, that money is so far gone that your actual impetus to attend is lower than on single ticket purchases.
Well, you also have to think about where the secondary market came from. People always forget, it was created by the San Francisco Giants in Major League Baseball, where you were selling season tickets. Well, I just bought 81 games on my season ticket package. I ain't going to go to 81 games. What do I do with the tickets I can't use? Well, I can give them to my friends, or I can, and they created the secondary market. They created eBay, so I could resell them, make some of the money back that I paid for my season tickets. Oh, and when the Yankees are in town, that ticket is even more valuable, so I can actually make some money. That model cuts both ways. The subscriber model created the secondary market, but now it hurts us because if they are buying subscriptions, they're buying that subscription with, to your point, no intention of seeing every show they've just bought. Maybe they'll see 4 of the 6, maybe they'll see 3 of the 6. They'll see how they feel when they get there. It's really challenging. This new world of the culturally curious and the casual consumer is a brave new world for us.
One thing that I thought was really interesting, I watched a talk by Herman Simon, I believe is his name, who is a famous. He runs Simon and Kushner, I think, or Simon and Kushner. They're a famous price strategy group for everything. And in this talk, he basically says that like everybody in business spends 80 or 70% of the time thinking about cost and 20% of the time thinking about volume and 10% of the time thinking about pricing, while tweaking cost makes very, very little difference, while tweaking pricing makes a huge difference. Do you see that when working with producers? Like, do you think people realize um, are placing the right amount of emphasis between focusing on costs versus focusing on pricing? And are people do you feel like more people are adopting the kind of services that you guys provide, or that it's still you got to convince them that this is a worthwhile thing to spend time on?
Oh no, the value equation of hiring a ticketing person and hiring them early on, it is absolutely proven, and now producers build that into their model. I've seen investment papers on a number of Broadway shows, and they have to prove out how they're going to make their money back. One thing that always makes me crazy is you get to the page and they say, well, we're going to be in this size house and we're going to sell this many tickets at this price, and the price is insane. And you're like, how? I mean, you're putting those numbers in because that's the numbers you need to make work to raise the money you need to do the production. It's the tail wagging the dog. What you should be doing is say, here's what we need to do the production, and how do we make that money back? And how do we get to that ticket price we need? And what are other shows that are at that ticket price? Do we look like them? Is there a realistic expectation that we can get to that price? And let's spend against the price we need to make, right? Yeah, that's a really good point. Tweaking the pricing, it's all about pricing. The effort to control costs on Broadway is very important. Broadway has gotten infinitely more expensive post-pandemic. You have to make a lot more money to break even these days. But that's all about pricing, and that's where dynamic pricing comes in. It's, and I've seen the misestimation of the value of a ticket is huge on Broadway. Everybody thinks they're going to have a huge hit and be the next Hamilton.
Optimism bias. It's just human
Love
nature. It's human nature to assume it's going to be better than the probable likelihood of it being that good.
Ticket people tend to be the skunk at the garden party. We tend to be realists, and we're like, oh, that's what you think you're going to get. You're not going to get that.
Well, Mike, go ahead.
No, it's just we're often the bearer of bad news.
But the driver of profit, I would assume. So, you get both sides of that coin.
Yep, exactly.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. This has been super interesting. I hope folks enjoy it. And how can they learn more about Nexus Ticketing Solutions or reach you if they realize like, hey, my prices could use some magic?
Well, yeah, go to my website, nexusticketing-solutions.com. I'm easily available through that. The other thing I would encourage people to do is take advantage of the resources that are out there. Like I said, we publish our grosses every week, and that's a great place to start the learning process. And it works for me because the more people know, the more they realize they need someone to help explain what they're looking at. So that's where we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that was our interview with Mike Rafael from Nexus Ticketing Solutions. Interested in using behavioral science to help your arts organization or show? Audience Alchemy can help you sell more tickets, increase individual donation, and enhance the effectiveness of your messaging. Reach out to me, Josh, on our website, audalchemy.com, and we're happy to schedule a time to talk with you. Thanks for tuning in, and catch you on the next one.